What if a battle royale had classes? What if playing a BR felt closer to playing an online RPG? While some watching this video, perhaps during the BR genre's heyday as well, are uttering a single phrase in response, not another BR. That's kind of what became of the sentiment for many players. When Fortnite BR launched back in 2017, it took over the world and inspired many other projects and developers to pursue the genre, whether for motivations of glory and/or wealth. Most of these projects would falter, some failing to even garner an audience to begin with. For the subject of this video, however, we will be covering the rise and fall of one of the most unlikely and successful BR competitors, created by one of my favorite companies as a spin-off project from a previous MOBA project. Hi-Rez has a knack for finding a market, and then putting their name in the hat with a game of their own. Hi-Rez would transition what started as just a BR mode in Paladins dubbed Paladins Battleground to a full-fledged separate game dubbed Royale that would launch in early access June 2018. Royale would wow Twitch streamers and the world alike, amassing a very impressive overnight player base. Ultimately, however, the game not long after would peter out into a quiet, near forgettable existence. While Royale is not literally dead yet, the game hasn't received an update in nearly 2 years, and the population has fallen to dangerously low, especially for a battle royale. What went wrong with Royale that caught the world by storm, and then faded into obscurity shortly after? On this episode of Death of a Game, we take a look into Hi-Rez's hero class shooter BR and its inability to find long-term success in the marketplace. Choose your class, hit the forge, and get ready to chase some chickens on this episode of Death of a Game, Royale. The story starts back in the fall of September 2016, following the successful launch of Hi-Rez's answer to Overwatch, Team Fortress 2, and the whole hero shooter craze. The result was a very successful and legitimate free-to-play competitor to Overwatch that was positively received by fans. But in another sector of the online shooter world was another title also adapting to a response in the market. Fortnite Save the World started as a PvE-only co-op build-em-up horde sandbox type game. Fast forward a bit, and Fortnite found themselves following the PUBG craze and attempted a battle royale of their own, titled just Fortnite and launched in 2017. The rest is, well, history. Hi-Rez couldn't resist the urge, and found themselves also chasing the BR trend as well, announcing a spin-off game mode of their own, much like Fortnite did, dubbed Paladins Battlegrounds. The promise of a 100-player hero shooter-based battle royale. The rest of the game was typical of a battle royale, where you spawned on a map with others and made a mad dash to loot up and fight to survive to the end of the whole thing. Hi-Rez would form an in-house team and give them a website and team name and everything. Heroic Leap Games. This is the team according to Hi-Rez behind the project itself, but when you click on their website link, it doesn't work. Paladins Battlegrounds was still in early development, but was set to release sometime later in 2018. As for the name and why it wasn't Paladins Battle Royale, Hi-Rez president Stu Chisholm stated his team opted for Battleground over Battle Royale due to the MMO inspiration, such as Altered Valley. While this logic makes sense, you can't always make sense when you're trying to make sense, if you know what I mean. But even past just the monetary success, there is the danger of perceptions not matching reality, because it didn't seem like Paladins Battlegrounds was actually like Altered Valley, or an MMORPG. It was still at the core a battle royale. Showing signs of ignoring the market or possible player perceptions early on wasn't good, but since the game hadn't launched yet, there was still time to accept that battle royale was your genre, not the MMORPG one. Hi-Rez would stop ignoring market expectations and rules and would end up changing the name of Paladins Battlegrounds to Royale. If you like that name change or not, I think is kind of less important. The more important thing is that the fact that they changed the name, and thus possibly averted negative perceptions. We saw how those perceptions helped Magic Legends just recently. Hi-Rez stated later that they renamed the game to stop it from fragmenting Paladins' player base, which I don't know if I really necessarily believe. Sure, it assuming its own identity is an important thing, but I'm more so focused on their lack of mentioning the whole Battlegrounds thing that they kind of mentioned earlier. After going through a round of alpha testing to a select few, Hi-Rez was ready to launch Realm Royale into early access on Steam sometime in the summer. Early access is the new craze where developers who otherwise don't need the funding utilize it in the same way that a brand new developer or a small indie team does. But early access has some strong perks and thus was attractive to launching in due to avoiding criticism, still being able to monetize, and also being able to work on development simultaneously. Realm Royale would launch in early access on Steam June 6, 2018. While the game had an impressive population at the hour of launch, when key influencers and content creators like Ninja and Tim the Tatman picked up the project, the population skyrocketed to a peak of 104,557 players on Steam. Realm Royale had 8,300 positive reviews, and although this chart shows nearly half of that number equalizing the negative reviews, those would actually come later in the month, as I will talk about shortly. The game was being very positively received, and was taking the streaming content and video game BR world by storm. A unique take on a familiar genre done in a way that immediately caught players' attention, and had the level of fun that Hi-Rez is kind of known for having in their games, especially at launch. You had 5 classes to choose from: Warrior, Mage, Hunter, Engineer, and Assassin, each with unique abilities and craftable weapons. With a few bells and whistles added for enjoyment, such as mounting to travel around like you do in an MMO or Heroes of the Storm, and a mechanic upon down when you played as a chicken who was then able to run around and attempt to be res to turn back into a player. Finally, the unique aspect of Realm Royale was the Forge, a crafting center where you specifically travel to craft items and weapons for you and your team. The issue is, well, everyone else could hear you and potentially steal your loot there as well. The simple but fun everyman for himself or team for themselves Battle Royale design was fun, but adding unique elements such as previously mentioned was key to Realm Royale's success thus far, with the crowning difference of all being the unique class system. Hi-Rez was going to need to move lightning fast if they wanted to keep up with the demand and the hype for their newly launched Battle Royale that was topping the Steam charts. Putting out the first patch notes on June 11, 2018, Hi-Rez would add a slew of balance changes, some hitbox fixes, as these were reported to be an issue by some players, and finally chicken trophies were added to the game, which then could be exchanged in the Forge for legendary weapons. This would encourage players to actually seek out killing other players in the early game, versus just playing for loot or avoiding conflict altogether in that initial player rush. According to Steam comments in the population at the time, the player base seems to react positively to these changes. Because Realm Royale launched on Steam, we can track their update cycle and cross-reference the Steam population data to find any clues regarding why the game failed. The fateful day for Realm Royale would come June 19th, 2018, the day where things started to kind of go wrong, when Hi-Rez put out a Forge update that no longer allowed legendary weapons to be crafted out of them. You can check the update thread on Steam and see how the audience treated this update. As explained by players on Reddit concerning Realm Royale, now less people would fight for control of forges, and instead the early game would shift towards more of looting the chests type of a game, incentivizing less PvP early game and more typical Fortnite style looting. Now that you can't reliably craft the more powerful items in the game, it directly injected a jolt of RNG into the game where it otherwise didn't have it before. Now you could randomly find a legendary weapon just lying around that you didn't have to work for anymore. Hit scan weapons were also added to the game, taking a completely adversarial stance, as the game primarily before was projectile based, which was kind of enjoyed by players due to the fantasy elements of the game, and the game not being so aim precise. It kind of fit the theme. While Hi-Rez was celebrating an impressive 3 million players reached for Realm Royale by a mere month after launch, their population after said mere month had jumped off a cliff. The peak population had dropped to a mere 23,576 players from their impressive 104,000 we mentioned earlier, and the average concurrent was down from 32,000 to 9,000. It didn't help that throughout this plummeting in player population, Hi-Rez seemed to act divorced from any player opinions and continued to push out more and more hitscan patches. Things like the hitboxes did need to be fixed, and they were being fixed, but as they were being fixed, simultaneously Hi-Rez was adding more instant firing type weapons to the game. This greatly changed the meta of the game that otherwise had things like slow rifles, bows, and the class abilities, of course. It made the game less unique and more like, well, Fortnite. And honestly, I think that's why these decisions seem to ignore popular opinion from the actual fans of Realm Royale. I think Hi-Rez, after tasting some of that Fortnite success, instead of leaning into what made them unique and ultimately successful in the first place, were going to attempt to further chase the trend they were chasing sort of from the get-go, even if it meant alienating their actual audience. You can read the patch threads on these Steam news updates and see that the audience even there wasn't responding well to the changes. Even when Hi-Rez added the deathmatch mode, for example, players were still largely complaining in the thread about the issues mentioned previously, such as the prevalence of hitscan weapons, which continued to push many of the original players out of the game. Introducing more content, the typical battle pass also present in Fortnite, and some more ways to earn items and cosmetics through progression, Realm Royale would launch the Primal Awakening Battle Pass July 13th, 2018. While the Battle Pass did add content as they usually do, it was also clearly added in a way to increase monetization of the game, which so far hadn't really been that egregious, so that's kind of fair. But this wasn't really going to help optics though, when the changes so far happening to the game had gutted the population, and it doesn't breed confidence when the players then feel like you're trying to monetize them even more after that. Realm Royale was going to need to either undo some of these changes or make some new ones more in alignment of their original vision, or risk losing their audience further. Hi-Rez, much like with their 3D MOBA title Smite, would be bringing Realm Royale to PS4 and Xbox One, coming in the way of closed beta launch sometime near the end of July. The console audience could potentially love Realm Royale, but they unfortunately were going to miss a chance to play the original version of the game, the version that the fandom had been kind of created from in the first place. By August, Realm Royale had lost 95% of their population on Steam. Population yet again shrinking from the previous month as well, now down to 3,900 average and 9,200 peak. Hi-Rez being Hi-Rez. Yet another unasked for patch and change would come sometime August 3rd, 2018, in the form of a crafting economy patch. Now chests would have a small chance of dropping a legendary armor, weapon, or ability, and they would also be removing chicken trophies. Many players felt like this was a pivotal core design change for the game, as the game now had almost gone completely in the Fortnite direction, abandoning the unique elements such as chicken trophies and a large focus on crafting versus randomly looting. Speaking of almost making the complete transition to Fortnite, well, the change that fully makes that transition has to be the bombshell that dropped September 24th, 2018. Hi-Rez decided they wanted to remove classes in Realm Royale. I repeat, Hi-Rez decided they wanted to remove the classes sold as the game's unique selling point in Realm Royale. Now that I'm done bashing my head against my keyboard, the logic from Hi-Rez was essentially, it limited the amount of viable loot that could be picked up, as not all loot could be usable by certain classes. This only became an issue though because they were making players less reliant on the forge and crafting in the first place. Hi-Rez felt by removing classes they would simplify the balancing in the game. You know, the typical approach when something's broken or you need to fix it. You just completely remove it. Wait a minute. Hi-Rez. This reeks of a suit walking into a game design room and just asking the game to be more like Fortnite. And the fans of Realm Royale answered their opinions on the changes, with the player count dropping at the end of September to 1,500 players concurrently and 3,800 players peak. Just when I thought Hi-Rez couldn't be any more perplexing, 4 days later, and they were announcing that they would be adding classes back, which is just a horrible look for optics. It makes it seem like your game design is only reliant on how the audience reacts after you put something out, which is problematic when you probably should be testing or polling your audience beforehand. Now suddenly classes are back, but they're not going to have the intended effect and bring back all those players, and they didn't. The new class system was more fluid and, frankly speaking, a little bit more flexible, adding a skill tree to help customize the classes further as well, but population continued to drop for the struggling class hero shooter BR. Battle Pass number 2 would come for Realm Royale January 16th, 2019, this time allowing for up to 80 levels of unlockable rewards and progressions. They added a free pass version and the typical premium version as well, which was an improvement. But this is content, and the new skins did qualify as new content. And the needle was moved somewhat, with the population starting for a first time with a positive population trend. January 2019, the population was up to 3,011 players, concurrent, and 8,271 peak players. All of this was happening, by the way guys, during early access. Realm Royale would reach open beta January 22nd, 2019. All 9 people interested responded on this update thread, which is kind of depressing considering this being an important milestone. At the same time, Realm Royale would launch an open beta on Xbox One. The population from January transitioning into February was increasing in number, so Hi-Rez had the opportunity to capitalize on this. Realm Royale was unable to maintain this, however, which could be due to their updates ruffling feathers in February, but none of these updates in particular seem, well, particularly damning to my eye. But then that trusty detective intuition hit me when writing this. Instead, the bigger dagger came in the form of a competitor who, much like Realm Royale did for a time, was taking the BR world by storm and gobbling up what was left of Realm Royale's audience, frankly. Apex Legends, launched in secret and developed by a talented and experienced development team and Respawn, looking to prove themselves after Electronic Arts kind of ruined their Titanfall 2 launch. Realm Royale's population meanwhile had dropped yet again, back down this time in March 2019 to a 5,699 player peak with 2,950 players on average. Realm Royale would launch on Switch June 20th, 2019 with cross-platform support. The Steam charts don't cover the Xbox, Nintendo, or PS4 populations, but in June they were showing only a minuscule population increase, which went quickly back down to 3,561 players and 2,160 for peak and concurrent respectively. Realm Royale was listed as the number 4th most downloaded game on the PS Store, but Steam population was at an all-time low of 2,666 peak players and 1,514 players concurrently. Realm Royale would receive their Deviled Eggs update January 31st, 2020, introducing LTEs or limited time events pioneered in Battlefield Heroes and now utilized by Fortnite to a great extent. On top of this, the update would offer a plethora of quality of life changes and some balancing changes. And then Hi-Rez struck, or rather didn't strike. This was the last update the game ever received. The entirety of 2020 leading into 2021 for Realm Royale as apparent on Steam charts was met with more drops in population, but worse, signs of abandonment. Hi-Rez has done this before on the series even. Global Agenda, for example, was abandoned as soon as Smite started finding success. They also abandoned Tribes of Sin in a very similar manner that we will cover maybe more in depth on another Death of a Game episode. All the while the past 2 years had been taking place for the game, Realm Royale had actually been primarily populated by bots. Yeah, you heard that right. In order to create the right amount of matches, Hi-Rez was leaning on bots to fill their 100-person Battle Royale lobbies. There's no choice to disable them, and you don't know if you're playing against one until, well, you do. This is one of those damned if you do or damned if you don't though. Bots were a desperation play by Hi-Rez to keep the game alive, but they were also slowly killing the game. So while the game isn't completely dead yet, there's a good chance that Realm Royale will slowly peter out into a non-existent population until Hi-Rez can quietly axe the game. The population at peak is down to an all-time low of 1,353 players, an average at 826 players. With no sign of update in sight, and all social channels media silent from Hi-Rez concerning Realm Royale, it's not looking good for the unlikely hero shooter BR's longevity going forward. Meanwhile, there are cries on the Realm Royale Reddit to roll the game back to an alpha version of the game, but although this could be an improvement or bring back some old fans, it didn't seem likely or that it would even have the desired result. I've hinted at it already, through their series of project abandonments. It's also presented in the Death of a Game Global Agenda episode as well. I dub it the Hi-Rez Effect. What is the Hi-Rez Effect? The Hi-Rez Effect is when you have a talented team of developers who can take an idea and build a fun, novel game around it, but sometimes seemingly for no reason, start making significant controversial decisions with little planning or oversight, and then suddenly abandon the title for another in their stable when it starts to get outperformed. It's a backhanded compliment in a sense, because they're definitely talented. Global Agenda, for example, is one of my favorite online games, flawed and all, and I think Smite, Realm Royale, and Paladins all have some redeeming or fun aspects to them. They also all had early successes, but Hi-Rez seems to have this inability to maintain successes for long, and when they get the feeling that a game is not doing well anymore, they choose to pivot to another one of their early successes. Knowing when a project is not working out and knowing when to cut your losses is a super important thing for a longevity of a company in general, but even game development. But when you seemingly do it at points where you have an actual quality product, but one that just starts to face balance or development issues, for example, frankly speaking, it seems like Hi-Rez has issues with believing in their projects enough to see them to the end. Realm Royale was no different here. The game went a year and a half with no update, no communication, nothing. I don't think there's any excuse for that, and I understand them being held accountable by their fans for this repeated behavior. In the end, Realm Royale was killed by its own creators' neglect, though there's definitely some things that Hi-Rez did that greatly impacted the game. What are some of those ways again? Well, Tom, start the music and I will answer that question, or better yet, collect the clues and evidence already discovered thus far, and put this case to bed concerning the death of a game, Realm Royale. Hi-Rez changed controversial core design elements a mere month after early access launch, in an attempt to mimic Fortnite. Speaking of Fortnite, Hi-Rez gambled on the Fortnite audience and lost their own audience. Realm Royale lost what made the game unique. Competition, competition, competition. AI bots dominated the gameplay for the course of many years. The Hi-Rez Effect in effect, and the game has been seemingly abandoned. The world of battle royales these days in 2021 looks a lot different than back in 2018. For starters, Apex Legends and Fortnite are still kicking, but Warzone also has propped up from Call of Duty and dominated the space as well. Every now and then we get the occasional BR launch, but they quickly die out, unable to compete with the tech and money backing of the likes of Epic Games, Electronic Arts, or Activision Blizzard. I think it's going to remain like that for the foreseeable future, because battle royales will be a hard genre to be competitive in for anyone without a pre-existing IP or fan base. And even then, as we have seen already as well, the chances aren't good with competing with the big three, especially not anymore as their grips continue to tighten. If there ever is another lesser-known innovative BR to sprout up and challenge the titans, I hope they can learn from the mistakes of the other titles who have fallen already. Thanks for watching, guys.
The gaming revolution comes in the year 2000. The door to the future. The door to freedom.